about to begin. We want to welcome you to the Vampire&Devil show. We want to welcome you to the Vampire&Devil show. It's gonna be bloody fun. We're gonna kill everyone. Welcome to the Vampire&Devil show. With lots of blood and lots of guts. Two horror fanatics and rock and roll nuts. Welcome to the Vampire&Devil show. You should watch the Vampire&Devil podcast.
Ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps, we are finally coming at you. Thank you right off the bat for your overwhelming support of the start of this new show, this podcast idea that myself and Devil have been playing around with for actually quite a long time, and we're really stoked to finally be getting it off the ground. So, as you guys know, my name is Salem.
Vampire?
And we've got Crazy White Devil.
And I'm the devil.
Joining us as well, and we are super stoked, like I said, to be coming right at you. We're going to kicking it off with our first series of horror talk, movie reviews, and just anything else that's kind of going on with everything going on. Devil, how you doing today, man?
It's a hot one here in hell today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a hot one all over the place, man. And to be honest, it's kind of a hot one when it comes to this first movie that we're going to talk about.
Oh yeah, man. We did a little podcast, a little thing to, poll to talk about which movie that we should do that's deemed a sick movie. That a lot of people talk about, what movies in the genre are considered over the top disturbing that people shouldn't watch.
Yeah.
And Antichrist, the one that we're going to talk about, was the one that won our poll.
Yeah. And it was definitely some interesting other things in that category. I mean, we had Cannibal Holocaust that people could have been interested in. We had a Serbian film. There was definitely a lot of interesting options for the fans and the dead to go with. But they wanted us to talk about Antichrist, so that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah, that's there was definitely some interesting choices on that one. But like I said, I mean, I guess we just leave it up to the fans to figure out, what they prefer to us to review. I'm not saying that we can't go back to some of those ones again, because we may do another sick poll again. But since the fans have spoken, Antichrist is the movie that we are going to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that one came out back in 2009. It's got Willem Dafoe. It's got Charlotte Gainsbourg, and it's a Lars von Trier movie.
Yeah, it's part of he was gonna do 3 movies, and we wrote this one sort of while he was in a mental institution having a huge mental breakdown, depression, and he wrote this. He wrote Nymphomaniac 1 and 2, and then he never did make the third of the trilogy. In my opinion, Nymphomaniacs 1 and 2 are decent movies. I mean, for a lack of terms, if you like seeing a lot of nudity in a movie, those were pretty decent. But I think this one, out of those 3 at least, this was the better movie because it was just a crazy, crazy concept and such a disturbing movie from beginning to end.
It was, but it's interesting too. I mean, we're gonna break it down. We're gonna get into all that kind of stuff, but it's broken down into 3 specific chapters, followed with an epilogue as kind of like a summary mixed with sort of a cliffhanger, but the movie in general is it's definitely deemed a sick movie, and it's definitely interesting and unique just based off the thought process of this couple dealing with what most people would probably deal as just kind of the ultimate grief and instead of going through the proper channels to seek like help from different areas, they decide that it's better, or maybe they feel that it's better to tackle it themselves. So we're gonna start this off, guys and girls, and all of you creepy people in between. But the fact of the matter is, Devil and I do actually have to say this, because the fact of the matter is we're going to break everything down. There is spoilers in this movie. Yeah. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate your love. And we'll do our absolute best to leave a lot of what we can up to your imagination and your want to go see the film, because we definitely want you guys to go see it. We both think it's a fantastic movie. But the fact is, we're going to talk about a lot of crazy scenes, a lot of crazy things that do happen that we can't do a review justice without discussing there. But we'll start things off with the prologue, which is deep and dark, and it doesn't pull any punches right off from the bat, and it sets the tone for the movie. And basically, they're at home, they're having their maritals, they're doing what marital couples do, they're having their alone time, they're out in the bedroom, and their child gets out of his crib, climbs up on a table, opens up the window on a snowy day, and frankly jumps to his death.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and you took it very mildly. Apparently, like, rumors are that William Dafoe has said that it is not his penis in the movie in that part. Right. We do see his penis later on in the movie, and we'll talk about that later. But there's a scene when they're having sex in the shower. There is penetration that supposedly William Dafoe has defunct that it's him. It's basically like a clip from another movie or something like that they just inserted into that. But like you were saying, yeah, it's basically these two couples are just getting it on and oblivious to the whole entire world. And like you said, the little baby decides to do a plunger real quick and see if he can make a snow angel from, a couple stories up, and it doesn't work very well for him.
No, definitely not. I mean, the shooting of it was very unique as well. I mean, the design, the movie starts off with almost kind of like an operatic feel. Very just interesting, classical music, very European, which of course this movie is. But it definitely has that European flair to it. But it's that, no sound other than the music playing and the clips that you're watching, leading to the death of their son and or child. I guess they don't really actually clarify what it was, and that's when it kind of turns into chapter 1. But just so that everybody knows, the entire movie is literally based around a 3-person cast, and that's Willem Dafoe as he, Charlotte Gainsbourg as she, and the baby, who does act, I believe Nick, is what the baby goes by in the movie. But it's very interesting for it to be a near 2-hour movie that after the first 5 minutes is all about 2 people. But anyway, chapter 1 starts off at grief, which basically kind of speaks for itself, in my opinion. It opens up with, the funeral. Willem and his wife and the closest family, I would assume, are walking behind as the casket of their son's being moved and being pushed, or whatever. She ends up, fainting and is getting checked on by he. And
to piggyback on that, though.
What's up?
I said to piggyback on that, too, while you were saying that there was only 2 cast members, while they're showing the funeral and you see other people in this movie, their faces are basically blurred. Yeah. So it's meant to that this movie, even though there are characters there in the background, they have no defining features. So when you see this funeral thing, you see people who are there at a funeral, but yet, like I said, you don't see any faces. All their faces are completely blurred because it's a story basically just about 2 people.
Yeah, that's true, and it's definitely uniquely shot when it comes to that way as well, because they're in they're back, behind the couple, and just kind of like there for the sake of knowing that they're involved in this funeral, this ceremony, but not to take the emphasis or the focus out off of Willem and Charlotte, by keeping everybody else out of focus. And then the chapter one's known as grief, which is pretty safe to assume that that kind of goes without saying, because that's going to be the first real emotion that they're going to have to tackle. Willem's character also, who is a therapist, he does that as a profession. He's talking with Charlotte and, talking about how, he feels that he knows her better than this other character who I guess has been in the business for a lot less amount of time, that Willem doesn't feel is qualified to be able to, I guess, take care of her or examine her or help her grieve. And he feels that he's really the only person that can help her or read her properly.
Yeah. And like in this chapter too, it's like you were saying, it's his therapy versus another person's therapy. The other physician wants her to be drugged up. So it's kind of a common, a social commentary about whether or not you should grieve and how you should grieve. Should you grieve naturally and with somebody and try to emotionally try to get yourself better, or should you take pills and stuff like that? Because even in the movie, they said that it was like 3 or 6 months or something like that in between when the child died to where she's in the hospital. She's been in the hospital for so long, just medicated the whole entire time. And it basically kind of is like the show you the drastic change of maybe how somebody else grieves versus how somebody else grieves. Because you were saying in the funeral part of it, you see William Dafoe's character, he dropped down and like basically just like have a huge breakdown. So it's not that he's not emotional about his child dying, he just handles it differently than how she maybe handle it.
Yeah, no, for sure. And so, and then they go and they basically kind of shock themselves up in their cabin, and basically try to do what they can to get over this situation, which relies at first around talking, where Willem's just explaining his displeasure with the thought of this other guy trying to dope her up. She's simply she wants to kind of communicate with him about how she's feeling, because she's also starting right off the bat by taking a lot of personal blame by like, this is my fault. And he's like, look, I was there too. And she's like, yeah, but I knew that he does this, like whether it's escapes the crib or climbs on things or whatever, where she's like, I know he behaves this way and I was tuned out.
Oh yeah. And then once they start figuring all this stuff out, that's when all of a sudden we get into the second chapter, which is basically Chaos Reigns, which is when shit starts to finally hit the fan in this movie a little bit. It starts to get a little bit darker, a little bit more erotic, because he's trying to protect her and trying to help her grieve, and she keeps using sex as a distractor to stop her from feeling the pain that she feels from losing the child. And he doesn't want to do it, but then again, he's a man, and he eventually ends up saying screw it and ends up having sex and realizes like that's probably the worst thing I could have done, because I'm basically enabling her now.
Yeah. So and that's the thing too, because the fact of the matter is Willem's character is what you would call professional. Like he's basically the definition of you should know better.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But at the same time, this is also his wife. He hasn't been hired for handling the grieving process of like somebody he doesn't know, where he can look at it from a certain way, speak about it at a certain, like on a certain level. He is trying to be a professional and handle the grieving of his wife and himself, but can't really just sit there. You know, that kind of old thing they kind of like make fun of in movies when it comes to therapists is them kind of, you know, sitting there. It's kind of like, well, tell me how you feel about that. You know,
Yeah.
what do you think of that? Tell me what you're thinking about. He can't really do that because, yeah, while he's trying to console his wife, he's got to console himself.
Oh yeah, for sure. And he basically is just trying to. In this chapter too. He realizes that she has a lot of fears, and her fears are what's basically enabling her. Like she had a fear of trying to get to the cabin, fear of trying to get on the grass, fear of this, fear of that. So he's just trying to beat this depression by tapping into her fear, finding out what she's fearful and what she's fear of, and try to get her to push forward and break through. Which, I mean, as a a therapist, I would imagine that's a good thing because people always tell you, face your fears. The best thing to do is to face your fears. But as we find out later on, that was probably the worst thing that he could have done, was to make her realize and try to go into her fears. Because once she starts tapping into her own fears,
Yeah.
you start realizing that this lady has been pretty messed up for a little while.
Yeah. No, 100% for sure. And it's also the one thing I also found kind of interesting about that particular chapter, with the amount of like sex involved in it too, is I couldn't help but kind of wonder back and forth. Is it also that feeling of like needing the release and needing the attention, the body contact of her husband as a support system, also mixed with the possibility of we can make another one?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It's definitely like a weird transition between the sex and that stuff like that. Because like I said, it can be masked for many reasons. She's just to try to dilute her pain, like I said, and or maybe try to get him to stop doing things and start doing this instead. So she's trying to, lure him by, providing the sex.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Hey, have you heard about that Vampire and Devil podcast? Oh, yeah, that's my favorite thing ever. I love watching them. We should watch them again. Yeah, we can. Let's go do it.
The whole bridge and arc of how that is stems first from the grieving process, leads to into pain, where you would mention the animals, whether it's the birds, the foxes, the deers, and trying to tap into like that darker fears, those curiosities. And that brings us up to chapter 3, despair, which brings in a little bit of crazy. So why don't you go into that?
Yeah, yeah. The despair starts. That's when the movie starts. That chapter 2, you're spiraling into that fear. The third one kind of just takes that fear and grasps on it and just twists the hell out of it. It's basically like you start to realize like how insane this woman really is. You start to see a lot of stuff. She talks about like it's basically how everything in her entire life has been just ruined and stuff like that, and like how she's always done like that. He ends up finding like a big huge chest, or like this like hidden section or whatever like that, little area, and finding out that she's been reading up a lot about how all these women have taken over men and stuff like that, with all kinds of different, sort of implying maybe like a little bit of witchcraft, maybe a little bit of like satanic stuff, maybe very cultish. Like that section was very. We started getting into a very occult part of the movie.
Right. And that leads to one of the probably more shocking scenes, at the very least, in despair. And that's, again, her asserting her dominance, maybe wanting to feel loved, maybe needing that human contact, or just needing it because she's going crazy, and that's just a part of her going crazy, is an excessive need of sex, and does nothing more than fucking cripples Willem's manhood with like a cement brick or something.
Yeah, yeah. She takes a 2x4 basically smacks him in the dick, knocks him out unconscious, and then starts jerking him, and
Yeah.
he bleeds all over the place.
Hmm.
And then she decides to go grab a tool, stick some shit in his freaking legs, open up his leg, and put like a weight so he can't move.
Very, very Misery, by the way.
Yeah, that definitely reminded me of that a lot.
Yeah, but yeah, she takes a like a hand drill, like an old school like hand
Yeah,
drill, right through his leg, and then puts like what basically looks like a dumbbell weight, um, with a bar through his leg with a nut, a bolt on the other end, and then subsequently goes to like tell him, you know, I don't know where the wrench is. I can't find the wrench,
yeah,
which we'll talk about later when it gets discovered where it's at. But yeah, it's a heavy scene that you don't really see coming, for the sake of that's such, even for a movie at the time of this magnitude and the directions that had been going, that's an insane turn, and like every type of what you would call an overreaction to a
yeah.
situation.
Yeah, and then when you think that what you've seen in this movie is ultimately the worst thing that you're gonna see, you see the worst thing that's even after that. She realizes that all this has to do with her wanting to have sex, and her sex is driving her madness. She takes a big, huge, rusty pair of scissors and cuts her labia off.
Right. Like just absolutely just, I mean, takes that thing just like right off, and ends up passing out from it, or passing out just in general. And that's when, Willem, who's continuing to deal with, like, I mean, everything, because even before that scene happens, you know, he's still trying to get away at times, kind of Misery style. At one point, he's like hiding under the roots of a tree. He's trying to hide behind like this giant rock with this weight through his leg. She's trying to unbury him with a shovel, as strange as that sounds.
Yeah,
But she's literally trying to dig him up out of the ground as he's trying to hide in it to save himself. And but yeah, he is lying there. She eventually passes out from whatever, and he ended up like, feeling around or breaking a hole in the floor and finding that the wrench, or at least a tool that will work for him, was chucked underneath the house.
yeah. It's like, yeah, she was like, I don't know where it is, and she knew where it was. She threw that stuff right under the thing.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, then that leads us into that, that part right there leads us into that fourth chapter, which is the three beggars, which in the part where before, when we were talking about the occult stuff, it talked about how when someone's going to die, you see three animals, and each animal was basically kind of odd. It was very weird. You saw a deer that, I mean, like I said, a lot of this has to do with sex and losing a child. The deer has a dead baby, like basically coming out of it, like a dead deer coming out of it, and it's running around with a dead deer hanging out of it. And then you obviously crows, are anonymous with with death and stuff like that coming. And then you have the fox basically with its guts all in and out and stuff like that. So it's basically, she's saying like, whenever you see any of these three, death is coming for somebody.
Yeah. And basically, the death that ends up coming is hers at his hands.
Yep.
So, like, what was your thought process on, frankly, the murder of his wife at his own hands?
I mean, to me, I almost thought like, it's kind of a mercy killing.
Yeah.
In my, I mean, at least through his eyes, she's completely insane. She's doing all this stuff. There's no help. There's no way helping her. She's crossed over way too far into the darkness, and he basically is taking her life.
Yeah. No, for sure. Because it also, I like the fact that it not only plays on the mercy killing, it also plays a little bit on the, you know, the idea of his own safety, self-defense in certain ways. I mean, the stuff that happened to her physically was self-inflicted, through the pain of loss. He still had that same pain of loss, but had multiple physical injuries delivered to him at her hands.
Oh yeah.
And it's also that idea of like, I don't think I can go any farther with her, not only just as a couple, but also possibly just in life. Like, all right, how do we handle this? Do we go back to normal society where she could freak out in public? Do we go back to normal society and I just keep her inside, kind of treat her like a vegetable? Or do I have to maybe consider her like having her, put up in a hospital and put away? None of which, and those are only things that I thought about throughout that particular area when it came to the killing of his wife, was things that I thought could be running through his head. None of those scenarios actually were shown in the movie as, no, he definitely thought, how are we going to do this? Can we do this? Can we be here and have her freak out, and so on and so forth? That's just kind of a way that it resonated with me, was all of a sudden, man, I need to get out of this and I need to free her at the same time, but divorce is just not going to cut it.
Yeah. And then after he kills her, we get into the epilogue.
Yeah.
Which basically, is I guess it depends on your opinion and how you really feel it is. You kind of see a bunch of, again, bunch of women running around up a hill, all with their faces blurred, because like I said, nobody's really a part of this movie other than the three main characters. But you see all these women running up the hill, and it kind of makes you think, like, what do you think about like how this movie ended? And it's like, it just makes you think, like, okay, is the woman really evil, or is man evil? And these are all women who have been killed by men because of them being evil? Or like, how did you take that ending with them running up the hill?
I thought it is not only an interesting soliloquy towards whether or not it's going to be about like who is necessarily evil, but I also found it to be a very interesting take on like things like succubuses, but also as well as the tree of life, which is something I actually found very, very interesting as well. Because, while you have the tree of life, you also have the tree of death. And that was always something I found particularly interesting, was seeing just levels and levels of different groups of women, nestled almost in like these little pockets in different places kind of around this tree. And then it was a matter of like, okay, how are we going to leave this up for interpretation? Which I think is one of the greatest things about film, is we don't actually have to necessarily be right.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very cool about that, because it's kind of got that we're going to get you somehow, we're going to find a way, as they're all kind of around him leading up to him. Also mixed with the whole like, well, trees, life, Mother Nature, giving birth, as well as just like, freedom, mixed with arguably the theme of the movie and possibly his, favorite pastime, which is sex.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to the part of the show where the devil takes a shit.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, that's the good thing about those kind of movies like this, because it's more of a, even though it's a horror movie and it has a lot of horror elements to it, it's very psychological. It's very, it's very, emotional, or however you want to feel it. People can take things differently. It's not a movie where it's like this or that. You can interpret the whole entire movie however you want to, because even in a scene, like, they show the woman where they were having sex in the beginning of the movie, saying that she saw the kid jumping down and just didn't do anything about it because she was in pleasure. But if you really watch in the beginning of the movie, she's they're oblivious to anything that's happening whatsoever. So
Yeah.
it kind of makes you think, did she really see that, or is that just her mind playing tricks on her, thinking that she actually did see her kid? So it's like you can interpret it two different ways.
Yeah, another level of guilt, perhaps. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to now make you realize that you saw that he was going to go and you chose to let it happen. But again, you can tell when you watch it, they're completely oblivious to it because they also show, I mean, he knocks off a bunch of things off that table, one of which
Yeah.
is like a little statue and stuff like that, like stuff that would definitely like make noise, you know?
Oh yeah, and like you said, like you said, it was cold, it's wintry.
Mhm.
You think you would have realized as soon as the window opened, like, ooh, it's a little breeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So I mean, it's definitely like that kind of thing. Like, yeah, and different people might like, different temperatures or whatever, but yeah, it's the middle of winter. It's heavily snowing out there, and there's just a lot of like little things to show that they were just in their own minds, as far as like, well, they were in their own zone, basically. They were concentrating on themselves and only themselves. But it's also one of those things too with like, yes, they deserve that. They're allowed that time as a married couple. But at the same time, your parents, you do have a responsibility. Their child's not 16 that they can just send them to the movies.
Yep. So what do you out of out of like all the hype for this movie and like the disturbing images and stuff like that, what do you rate this movie as far as like if you got to do it on a star
Yeah,
map?
I rate it high. I I give it me personally, I give it a solid 9 out of 10. I also really appreciate, because again, we dabble also, and we dabble, but we're, our area of expertise is also horror movies, and horror movies aren't genuinely highly rated or ranked well in the general populace. But one of the things I always actually thought was very, very awesome about this movie is it actually was picked up by the Criterion Collection.
Yeah.
When it came to like movies being released that are really considered like the creme de la creme of movies, or things that have a very strong message or deal with something incredibly important. And I always found that was very interesting to see a movie like Antichrist with so much sex, so much nudity, demonology, self-mutilation, murder, neglect, that the people that were in charge of the Criterion Collection would see enough art in the movie to want to include it in their library. So I actually always found that to be particularly interesting. But anyway, I give it a solid 9 out of 10. I can't give it that final little check, despite the fact that I really, really did like it, only because at times it does get slow.
Yeah.
It goes in a couple different kind of tangents and in a few different directions that sometimes kind of breaks the fantasy a little bit. But as far as like the design of it, the way it was written, the way it was shot, I think was particularly excellent. And I loved the untapped potential of where it might have even still been able to go but that would have involved it being like a 4-hour movie. But
Yeah.
I do personally give it myself a solid 9 out of 10 because I really do enjoy it. I appreciate it. It hits on so many levels that you can understand as a person, but are also definitely curiosity points. Like, man, like how would I react if I watched my wife do this to themselves, or if I was hit with this object or shackled by my wife, and so on and so forth, while dealing with my own grief. So for the sake of like slowness and a couple just kind of strange like side tangents is the reason I can't go full up with it with a 10 out of 10. But I mean, this wasn't my first time seeing the movie, and I would gladly watch it again. So it's a solid 9 for me.
Oh yeah. I would say definitely like I put it in like an 8 or a 9. I mean, I've watched the movie a couple times. It is a movie that like mentally you probably shouldn't watch it so many times because it is very, it is emotionally,
Yeah.
depressing and stuff like that. It's a movie about, as far as parents goes, it's the worst thing that can happen to a parent.
Yeah.
And and then all the other stuff that kind of goes in and out of the movie. So I mean, it's definitely a movie to watch. It's a movie to watch, but it's not a movie to watch as far as being entertained, because
Yeah.
it's not necessarily an entertaining movie.
No.
It's more of like a kind of a intellectual kind of movie, like you said, with the Criterion people picking it up, stuff like that. So whenever those guys grab stuff, it's got some deep thought behind it. It's not just a normal killer coming after somebody and blood and guts and bad acting.
Yeah. No, it's honestly, I as like a closing kind of thought, speaking off the acting, is I really got to give it up for Willem, who I personally am a fan of. I like so many of his movies, whether it be his character. He's so versatile as well. I mean, for
Oh
movies
yeah.
like The Boondock Saints, where he plays, a gay police detective, a small roles like in Crybaby, where he's simply playing a security guard in the jail. Up through what the average person knows him as, which is the Green Goblin, probably from Spider-Man. And but he's just so great in so many different things. He's got upcoming stuff like his appearance in the upcoming Nosferatu movie with Bill Skarsgård, which has me really excited because I think he's going to be fantastic in that. But I truly do like Willem quite a bit. So I always try to take into consideration my own fandom when it comes to stuff. Like I can completely love on somebody and they can be like my favorite actor, my favorite actress. Doesn't but that doesn't make the movie good. When it comes to Charlotte, I didn't know anything about her when it came to that role. I did some research on it that she wasn't the first choice, but I thought she was excellent. That's some heavy shit, man.
Yeah.
Not only because there's so much that truly she can relate to, and what I mean is, even if portraying a mother at a time that she maybe didn't have a kid, and I don't personally know if she has one now, but take into account that she's still a female, knows that women give birth to children and stuff, and then do abruptly lose one, and again, fans and people that are curious will see when they watch this movie that it was a toddler, it was an infant, the child was barely with us on the planet before tragedy struck. But anyway, I thought Charlotte was excellent. I really thought it was just interesting. Obviously, just like Willem, they deserve a certain amount of recognition and deserve a certain amount of their flowers for also being bold in a very artsy film that involves that kind of full frontal, those kind of situations, that kind of pain, and those type of situations.
No, yeah, but like you were saying, yeah, I mean, like they're completely, like I said, the drastic change of like, her as an actress, and like I said, I think she was primarily like a European actress that she was not very hugely well known, and then you have someone like William Dafoe who is internationally well known, and like to see someone like Willem Dafoe be able to do a movie like this where it does deal with a lot of dark topics, and the fact that you see him in his old man body. you see parts of him that you wish you wouldn't have seen in William Dafoe.
Right.
That I kind of kind of wish I hadn't seen, but you got to give it to him. You got to, no pun intended, he's got the balls to do this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's hopefully somewhere down the line we'll get the opportunity to talk with him for a little while, because I would love to just hear his insight on where his mind was reading the script even before saying yes, I'll do it.
Yeah. Oh, for
So
sure.
I think that one's very, very cool. But yeah, so Ghouls and Goblins, thank you so much for checking out this review. We're going to stay with you, but we are going to take a little bit break. But collectively, between Crazy White Devil and myself, I think we can safely say that this is about an 8.5 between the two of us out of 10 for Antichrist. So hang tight. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be back with you shortly.
Hey, it's your boy, the Devil, here with another quick movie review. Just got done watching the movie Suitable Flesh. It was directed by Joe Lynch, stars Heather Graham and Barbara Crampton. Joe Lynch you might know as the second half of Holliston with Adam Green. Heather Graham everybody knows, and Barbara Crampton from Reanimator. It was a pretty good movie, lots of blood, lots of guts, some titties. Brought back the old school way of horror. I think you should check it out. The Devil says so.
What's up there again? There, ghouls and goblins, spooks and creeps. It's Vampire and Devil. We're coming back at you with another horror movie review based off the polls that you guys chose. We already talked about Antichrist, but we're going to get into something a little bit more for the holiday. For all you lovers out there, we're going to break down 1981's My Bloody Valentine.
Valentine's Day.
Let's see, what can Devil and I say about this movie other than, well, it's an 80s camp, I guess. The kills are solid. I mean, I'll go to bat for the kills of this movie all day long. But as a movie overall, Devil, I guess they tried.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, one of the crazy things about this movie is that it's been known that Quentin Tarantino considers this one of his favorite slasher movies. And it's like, out of all the slasher movies been made, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love My Bloody Valentine, but yeah, this is a low on the list compared to some of the other slashers that are out there. I mean, I can understand them not picking the big main ones that everybody would love, because everybody expects you to pick, the Freddys and the Michael Myers and all that stuff like that. So I kind of like it that he picks more of an obscured movie. But yeah, this movie didn't age very well.
Not really. And don't get me wrong, bro. I'm sure I can speak for both of us that, yeah, for the sake of our fans and the horror community, yeah, we're going to have our share of Jason talk, Freddy talk, Michael talk. But that's not going to be today, because we're going to talk about My Bloody Valentine. But the one thing I will tell you, though, man, is like, the thing about that movie is like it catches you off like right away, as kind of pulls you in, because it's one of the faster movies to have a kill like right off the bat.
Oh yeah. It's like basically like you're less than 5 minutes in, and you're already getting somebody, this chick's already getting murdered and whacked and killed already.
Yeah, it's just like right off the bat. The movie's overall, it's got like, a pretty solid kill count. But it does have this very interesting, I can't even really call it like bipolar thing to it, where it just seemed just very sporadic, where I almost kind of feel, and I can't put this on George, the director, because it all still stems a bit from the screenplay, of course, as the movie was written. But it's got this very almost kind of weird feel to it, where I feel like some of the writing of this movie is a person who's not even in touch with like their own emotions, because you have these scenes of like solid buildup, because I like the concept of the movie, but then you have this buildup, you've got this feud, you've got these love triangle things, but then you have these weird scenes where people are just weepy in a corner.
Yeah, it's weird. And then it's like people are fighting, and then all of a sudden they're eating food off of like a cooked from a car, and then they're hanging out in like a dumpster area, like a car lot thing, and then all of a sudden it's like you're over here, then you're over there. It's like this movie's, yeah, like you said, like it's very sporadic, and like the acting is like kind of like these guys are pretending to be drunk and whatnot, but I don't think any of them have ever been alcoholics in real life.
Right. And it's interesting about that. So like let's get a little bit into like the plot of this, where it's based around, the killings that happen around Valentine's Day in the past, and now it's more of the present where these things haven't happened, but there's always like kind of threats each Valentine's Day, of this killer of Warden coming back as each year. And it's you've got it based around the mining community of this small town, and then the deaths that sort of start happening, like we already discussed, practically right off the bat.
Yeah, and that's like the cool aspect of this movie too, is it actually is filmed in like, I think it was filmed in Canada, but it was actually filmed in like, real places, like real mining and stuff like that. Like these people actually like got pretty dirty and down and dirty to like make the movie.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's real life stories about the dangers behind, the job of being an actual miner. So, I wonder, it'd be kind of curious and maybe even kind of cool somewhere down the line to, because some of these actors do pop up in various cons, that maybe it might be kind of interesting to talk to them about what their thoughts are of filming in actual dangerous locations.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like you were saying, like it's crazy, like just like the whole atmosphere of the movie, because it's your normal '80s slasher movie. Don't do this, don't do that. You have the old guy warning about don't have the party, and and what are these guys are supposed to be young, but they all look like they're in their 40s. But these young kids are 40 looking, but
Right.
but of course they're gonna go out and party and have fun and have sex and all the other good stuff because you're young. They're not gonna listen to the old guys that are like, hey, everything to them is considered like, oh, we're not gonna listen to this. It's just a tale to scare us kids from not having parties.
Right. It definitely looks like back in 1981 that there weren't a whole lot of Justin Longs working in the movie business. That guy who looks 22 years old for like 30 years now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the beauty of these like '80s movies back in the day. Like even when you watched a lot of like these movies, like these kids, and it's like, yeah, these guys aren't kids. They're full grown adults. But like I said, it's maybe maybe it had to do with getting directors not wanting to deal with the actual real young kids, because then you got to worry about legal stuff and stuff like that, so it just made it easier just to. But I always laugh about those with the cheap cheesy horror movies of these guys like supposedly are teenagers, or I don't think these guys are supposed to be teenagers. I think they're all supposed to be like in their early 20s,
Yeah, like
like college kids.
yeah, or even just, early to mid 20s, the everyday job. It's
Yeah.
obviously a small town, so it's very common for people to, just take what's the main way to make money is like, well, we're a mining town, so, kind of, working in that. But probably the biggest story, probably the biggest angle when it comes to what this movie is based around, would you say is probably the lovers' quarrel?
Oh yeah, I mean the whole movie's basically main around I mean there's other characters, but you have the three characters, that the two men that are like madly in love with this one girl, and both of them are trying to win her affection, and neither one of them are doing it in a very good way.
Right. Because you've got the current boyfriend who's now feeling threatened by the return of the ex-boyfriend, who kind of vanished and didn't really, kind of left Sarah hanging.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, yeah, it's a very emo movie before emos were really a thing.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good way to put it. It definitely is like sappy, and it's very like kind of weepy and stuff. But again, the kills are solid, and I think that's the thing is I think that is what gives My Bloody Valentine 1981 its staying power, because the horror community probably can collectively say that like the power of a kill can definitely carry a movie on. Like,
Oh yeah.
We'll have plenty of time to talk about, like I said before, Jason and Freddy and Michael and all that. But for example, there's, as like a small segment, there's always nobody overly hypes up Jason X, but everybody remembers the liquid nitrogen, shatter kill.
Yep.
People still talk about that kill to this day off a movie that's just another attempt of horror going into space. But
Oh yeah, and I think personally in this one, some of my favorite horror ones are the deaths in this movie. I love the girl who I think her name was Mabel, I think, but she ran the laundry thing, and her like coming out of the laundry all burnt and nasty. That was pretty sick for for a movie that came out in the 80s.
yeah, it definitely no the dryer kill, or at least the dryer finish, because she was kind of taken out before
Yeah.
that, is absolutely great. It definitely is what I would consider an iconic kill, because it's definitely remembered. For me, I'm way into just the pickaxe through the throat and out the eye.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that one's a killer one too. Anytime you can, I mean, that's just a cool. I think that could be a reason why this guy made this movie. It's like, would be an interesting, tool to kill somebody with, and the pickaxe is such a crazy tool to like just kill someone with, because it's very brutal, but then again, it's kind of heavy and hard to like wield it, so you couldn't kill too many people with it. At a
Yeah.
time, at least.
No, for sure. And it's interesting too, because the horror movies are typically, they typically are based around kind of their own little Mount Rushmore of weapons, where you would, which are kind of, knives, stabbing type things, axes slash hatchets, more basic handheld type things that are easier to wield, because you even don't get a whole lot of full on axes. You tend to get things that are a little bit more swingable. But man, no, you've got this cat with a double-edged, pickaxe, just taking bitches and dudes out.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I mean, a lot of people like this movie. I mean, like I said, it's definitely one up there. I mean, there are some, like we had on the poll. There are some other Valentine movies, but this one was always really really big. I mean, there's a band called My Bloody Valentine that named themselves after this movie. You obviously have, like I said, Quentin Tarantino's favorite slasher. They remade it a few years, probably like 10 years ago or so again. But, so it's My Bloody Valentine's always kind of stayed relevant throughout all the years.
No, it definitely has, and there were good things about the remake too. I mean, they had a great kill where a girl's kind of facing the camera, and they did the movie in 3D, and all of a sudden she takes it right to the back of the head, and her eye is on the end of the pickaxe coming straight at your face.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I
yeah.
was
That's something that that horror movies need to go back to doing, is those cheesy 3D movies, like Friday the 13th did it and stuff like that. Those were always great.
Jaws.
Yep.
It's your boy, the devil again, here with another quick movie review. I'm starting my self-indulgence movie reviews, reviewing movies with the word devil in it. This time I started off with the movie Devil. It was directed by John Donnell. It was written by M. Night Shyamalan. It's a good movie. It portrays me very well. I like the blood and the guts, the suspense, the horror. What other devil movie should I watch? There are so many. The devil within us? The devil wears Prada? Who knows? You have to check out, or check in, or do something on the interwebs of horror.
No, definitely. That's definitely a good thing when it comes to that. Is it's one thing to really want to try to get deep, dark, and psychological when it comes to movies, but at the same time, it never hurts to keep certain camp to it, especially when you're dealing with like remakes and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we recently had that not remake, but kind of continuation of The Exorcist, where yeah, there's been 50 other Exorcist movies since the original one, but at least this one with the returning of the mom in the reprising her role, that gave a little bit of like continuity to returning to the first one. But you remember campy things about the first Exorcist as well, where you've got taglines like "Your mother sucks cocks in hell." I mean, it's just there's always a certain amount of tongue in cheek that comes with movies, and My Bloody Valentine's definitely no exception.
Oh yeah, yeah. And then, you get to the thrilling end of the movie and you find out who the killer was. And then you're like, well, the plot for this movie didn't really make sense with him being the killer, because like you were saying, one minute he's moping and crying and the next minute he's killing somebody, and you're like, well, how is this movie? I think because I read something that they basically kept it away from everybody in the movie that was making the movie, didn't even know who the killer was. But and then the killer kind of figured, the guy who played the actor who played the killer figured it out by like some things. But yeah, they kind of kept it kind of secret. So I think that's why they filmed it that way, so they could keep it in suspense, at least for the actors, maybe so that whenever they were doing their roles, they wouldn't act a different way if they already knew who was the killer, versus like knowing right off the bat who the killer is, and then you'll be like, maybe you'll act differently with them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting too, because if you do research and actually take a look at something like IMDb about the actual casting, I actually always found this to be kind of interesting with the way they like kind of tried to put it out versus like how it was kind of tagged. So you've got Neil Affleck, who played Axel, who basically played the killer. But the thing that's interesting is if you actually look at the casting, you've got, Peter, the actor, the real life actor who plays, the miner. And it's not so much that, because having like a stunt person who's like the main killer or whatever, yeah, that makes sense. But if you actually look at the way his name is in his casting, it's, the miner / warden. Harry Warden. So like he's cast, or at least presented as the miner, which is fine, but also the OG killer. But the whole movie is based around basically the unmasking of Neil's character Axel as the killer.
Yeah.
Which leads into an interesting point of, is there continuity issues in this movie between how quickly you see Axel's character versus how quickly a kill happens across town or down in the mine or stuff like that? What do you think, Devil? Do you think they kind of dropped the ball a little bit when it came to actual continuity?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I think it was just like I said, maybe either it could be bad editing. It could be, like I said, it could be about the fact that they were trying to hide who the killer was from the other actors. But yeah, it's such an odd timing to the movie, and an odd, like, certain scenes just jump right into another scene and they don't kind of connect each other very well.
Yeah, no, 100% when it comes to that. But one thing that was actually kind of cool, just outside of My Bloody Valentine, is Neil Affleck, who played Axel, also has he's done other things outside of the horror genre, like directing episodes of The Simpsons of all things.
Yeah. That right there is the reason why horror movies and horror actors are the greatest, because people always assume that they're scary people or they're typecasted, and here's a guy that was in a horror movie that's directing Simpson episodes.
Right. And, The Simpsons goes back to, 88, 89. So, and it's true because it's probably the easiest genre to get typecast in, probably followed by like, goofy comedy. Like you do comedy movies like, Dude, Where's My Car or Harold and Kumar. It's probably going to be pretty easy to get typecasted in those type of roles. And horror definitely has its own issues when it comes to typecasting. But the one thing I can say probably about horror, though, is since you have to deal, though, with a more influx of emotions, I do feel like if you go the proper channels, actors and actresses do have the opportunity to maybe break out a little bit easier than, campy, like pot smoking comedies and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, for sure. So with your rating, how would you rate My Bloody Valentine?
It's maxing out for me at a 6. And the only reason it's getting that is, again, for me, it's the quality of kills. There are some weakness to it, like I couldn't stand the pickaxe to the stomach on the girl with just the slow Oscar nominated death.
Yeah.
It was such a weird one for me. But the kills in general are, in my opinion, for that time period, I actually think they're pretty high quality. From the dryer kill that we spoke about, from the pickaxe to the neck and out through the eye, from the girl that was basically impaled, through the through like the air pipe spike thing, almost kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre style, like meat hook style.
Yeah.
As well as the I believe it was the guy that was like impaled like on the wall. I thought the quality of kill. I mean, look, every now and then there's a kill that maybe just gets away, or you're like, you could have done a little bit better on that one. And yeah, that was my my slow pickaxe. I'm like, my Oscar worthy my Oscar worthy kill. It's gonna max out to me as a 6. Frankly, as a movie in general, it's a 4. But I'll give it. I give it a couple bonus points just because of the quality of kills at a time where CGI was not a thing. It was all about prosthetics. It was all about what you could do with real life material.
Oh yeah, I would be with you about a 6 too as myself. Like you said, I would probably rate it lower if it didn't have the kills. I'd probably, I'd give it a little extra bonus because I am a huge Quentin Tarantino fan. So him being that, I'm definitely going to give that. I would give it more bonus points if there were some boobs. It's so weird that it's an 80s movie that's horror that doesn't have any nudity in it, which is basically a staple of 80s horror movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say, I'd do it about the same, but I'd give it a solid 6.
Give it a solid 6 at the max. So yeah. So it looks like that's the way it's going to be, fans. We're going to go 4 for the movie. We're going to do 6 because of the kills. So overall, My Bloody Valentine, you're going to get a 5. So that's our story. And we're sticking to it.
We're sticking to it.
That's
until the minor comes and gets us.
Exactly. So yeah. So out of our kill ranking, you're going to get 5 kills for My Bloody Valentine. That's how you're going to get it from us. But judge for yourself, guys. You got a lot to look for. You got a lot to look at. There's definitely no shortage of Valentine's Day horror movies out there. You've got My Bloody Valentine. You've got Valentine, which was on our poll. And then you've also got the remake of My Bloody Valentine as well, which, is maybe something that perhaps we'll look into in the future because it's definitely got some intrigue on that. And the one thing I definitely know that the remake of My Bloody Valentine had that Devil likes is it definitely had some nudity for him in that one.
Yep.
But absolutely. So, fans, we'll be back with you guys shortly. Thank you so much for checking out our review of My Bloody Valentine. So it gets 5 overall on the kill count, and we'll see you guys soon.
Good evening, and welcome to the part where we talk about those who have died. This month in February, we honored these 3. Heather O'Rourke, the little girl from Poltergeist. Donald Pleasance, Dr. Loomis from the Halloween movies. And Bill Paxton, for not only did he be killed by an alien, a predator, and a Terminator, but he also was in one of the greatest vampire movies ever, Near Dark. We honor these three. We never know who or when the bells toll, but when they do, we will honor thee.